saw that. Brick killed a guy.
A little background before I kick this one off. I'm a frequent diner at PF Chang's, the name affectionately given to Brendan Schaub's anti-fan group over on the Fighter and the Kids subreddit. So I was browsing the sub one day when I saw this post. Queen Cleopatra had dethroned the Gringo Papi as the worst reviewed content on IMDB, which is no small feat. For those who are unaware, the Gringo Papi held the title for the worst rating on IMDb since its release in 2022. Brendan Schaub, who made the special, has what is probably the biggest anti-fan group of all time with the aforementioned Fighter and the Kids subreddit, which currently sits at 125,000 homeless cats at the time of writing, making him the most mainstream lolcow the internet has ever seen. When I looked into Queen Cleopatra some more, I saw it had some surprising similarities to the Gringo Papi. Both were made by some of the most disliked figures in pop culture, Brendan Schaub and Jada Pinkett Smith. Both contained obvious falsehoods that primarily had to do with race, and both failed at their attempted genres. One a comedy special and the other a documentary. Despite being a follower of the Fighter and the Kids sub for some time, I had never actually sat down to watch the entirety of the Gringo Papi from start to finish. I've seen clips here and there and have heard about how epically bad it is, but I've never judged the special for myself. As for Queen Cleopatra, that's something I never would have even considered watching in the first place. The reviews speak of how inaccurate it was and how it colors all the historical events with modern day values, making it nearly worthless as a raw documentary and uninteresting as a historical narrative. But the low ratings of Queen Cleopatra puts it next to what might be the most iconically bad content ever made, so I had to check it out. And to fully inform my decision of which one was worse, I had to finally watch the Gringo Papi.
Never met a little buzz.
Now, after watching both, I'm here to report which one is worse, the most nonsensical, uninformative documentary I've seen, or the worst comedy special to ever exist. Before I get into all that though, consider leaving me a like for this one. I don't ask for much, but I had to sit through 4 hours of objectively bad content to make this video. Now, let's get into it, starting with Queen Cleopatra.
Cleopatra walked through the sandstorm of history and left footprints so deep that no man could ever erase them.
Within the first 30 seconds, it's clear why a lot of people noped out of this one. I'm not someone who likes to harp on wokeness. I think over-criticizing movies and TV shows on that basis is just as cringe as the other side. Like, if you really have a problem with Ariel being black in The Little Mermaid, then you might need to realign your priorities. But Queen Cleopatra is not that. Holy girl boss, this slaps you in the face with it. I'm not going to point out every historical inaccuracy or alteration in the show. I'm not an Egyptian history buff, I'm just a casual viewer like most of you. But damn, there were some things in there that right off the bat just felt driven by a particular narrative rather than the true telling of events. So Cleopatra's a warrior queen now with training in combat and beating men?
I don't care what they tell you in school. Cleopatra was black.
The biggest hill that Queen Cleopatra is dying on right now is that Cleopatra was black, which she just wasn't. According to historical accounts and any physical depictions we have of her, Cleopatra reportedly had Greek and Macedonian heritage. But the documentary clearly states that Cleopatra was black, based solely on what one woman's grandmother told her. And the response to this criticism has been exactly what you might expect, suggesting that anyone calling out this inaccuracy as racist and referencing old movies that depict Cleopatra as white. But just because she wasn't white doesn't mean she was black. And just because older historical fictions depicted her as white doesn't mean a modern-day documentary can get away with a racial inaccuracy just to make a point. Beginning the documentary with such a blatant fabrication of its subject is just a terrible place to start. They even contradicted the idea that she was certainly black by admitting that we don't really know what she looked like. After that, why would you trust this documentary to tell you anything true?
There's been a lot of research to prove that her mother was Egyptian, but we can't know for sure.
The documentary genre is no stranger to director-driven narratives. I'm sure a lot of you remember those BuzzFeed lists of facts that Making a Murderer left out, and learning that Stephen Avery probably wasn't such a good guy after all. But that documentary told a compelling story and gave us no reason to mistrust the information when we were watching it. There were definitely biases there, but the director hid them well rather than planting a flag in a widely known falsehood right out of the gate. Historical documentaries are supposed to lay out the facts and tell the stories of their time in a compelling way. In the best cases, these should be portals to another time period, informing the audience of how and why things happened in the context of history. Queen Cleopatra is so clearly altered by the modern zeitgeist that it's impossible to see it that way. It seemed like this show wanted to be a documentary and a piece of historical fiction, but ended up being a lazy mix of both. They didn't seem to do enough research to make a compelling and informative documentary, and didn't go through enough effort to form a narrative based on the life of Cleopatra. And god damn was it boring. I can't emphasize that enough. Honestly, after watching 4 episodes of that, I think it probably benefited from the negative feedback it got by planting its flag in the Cleopatra is black camp. It may not have hit such lows with the reviews without that, but it probably got a lot more eyeballs on it because of it. Okay, enough of that for now. That was boring. Let's move on to a more fun one, the Gringo Papi.
Dicey.
Now, to fully understand the Gringo Papi and its cultural significance, you need to know a bit about Brendan Schaub and the Fighter in the Kid subreddit. If you're already homeless, you can just skip to this point in the video. You'll already know all this stuff. Brendan is a former UFC fighter turned comedian and podcaster. He came up through The Ultimate Fighter and benefited from making it to the finale on the season with Kimbo Slice before getting knocked out by Roy Nelson, the first of several iconic knockouts that Brendan would eventually become known for.
And oh yeah, he's out. And Herb Dean rescues him, and Brendan is fighting the Invisible Man.
After getting hammered by better UFC fighters, Joe Rogan sat Brendan down on his podcast and proceeded to give him the harsh truth that Brendan wasn't good enough to fight and that he should pivot to comedy and commentary. To this day, that conversation is probably the most viewed piece of content that Schaub has been involved in, and it was humiliating. Eventually, Schaub took this advice and leveraged his fighting history and relationship with Rogan into a Showtime deal, a successful podcast, and several other lucrative avenues. Now, in 2023, almost all of the major deals Brendan was involved in have gone away. Even Rogan seems to have cut ties with them.
People are weird, like that want a headline, and you know that they know. Like, you know that you're not really a headliner. Like, what are you talking about?
Although Brendan has been on several podcasts over his fighting career, The Fighter and the Kid was the most popular and had a large following at its peak. The downfall of Brendan Schaub is a pretty long story, and I'm not going to go through it all right now. Several other YouTubers have made videos about different points in Schaub's downfall, which I'll link to in the description if you're interested. A personal favorite of mine is the Bayes Frequency video on the Ariel Helwani Brendan Schaub beef. Long story short, the fans of The Fighter and the Kid started noticing how arrogant, selfish, and otherwise insufferable Brendan had become. He dismissed all this fair criticism as haters and likened their opinions to that of homeless people or cats. They don't matter.
What do you care? It'd be the same as if a cat created a profile.
That's a good example.
Who cares?
So, naturally, his subreddit turned on him and has been gaining steam as an anti-fan community ever since. That's the climate that the Gringo Papi released into. A 25-minute YouTube special that followed a 1-hour Showtime special Brendan had released 3 years prior. It was a downgrade in every way, and very much mirrored how hard Brendan had fallen from grace in the past 3 years. And even with such absurdly low expectations, the Gringo Papi still bombed. Lies, fabrications, fake stories, this one has it all. Thanks to the sleuths over there at the subreddit, we know for a fact that Brendan's entire bit about his Mexican wife, which was the largest part of his special and the theme of the whole thing, was entirely made up. She's not born and raised in Guadalajara, she's from California.
Yeah, so I was born in Hollywood, California, which is ironic, but it's true. I was born at Kaiser off of Sunset.
This plays right into Schaub's persona, as he lies about even the smallest details if he thinks it'll make for a good anecdote or make him look cool. Schaub is clearly trying to be a relatable everyman with this special. He's not Anthony Jeselnik, where you just know all of his material is fabricated. If you don't know all this background, you assume that everything he's saying is based on a real story, but they aren't. He just makes it all up, which is why none of it is funny. No vulnerability, no honesty, just lies to make himself look good. I mean, what's funnier than the guy who brags about his big dick, right?
Still got my Ugg boots, still got the big dick, not a big deal.
Now that I watched the whole thing start to finish, I realized that I've already seen pretty much all of it in clips, as the special was only 25 minutes long. The whole thing is painfully unfunny, and the fact that it's only 25 minutes long is laughable when you consider that he called it a special. Most people in the subreddit assume that there were massive chunks of unfunny jokes taken out, which is probably true. There are a few obvious cuts, and the special just ends, making it seem like they maybe cut Brendan's final bit. What can I say about this thing that hasn't already been said? He laughs at his own terrible jokes constantly. There's piped-in crowd laughter that definitely isn't real. He tries to steal Dave Chappelle's microphone knee slap thing. He name drops his friends like Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan for cheap applause, and he lies more than anything they put in Queen Cleopatra.
Black.
So which one of these two terrible pieces of video content was worse? I broke these down into a few categories to make them easier to compare. First, let's consider their failure in their respective genres. Both were pretty bad here, but I give Queen Cleopatra the slight edge because despite being hard to get through and full of inaccuracies, I did learn a couple things that are probably true from watching it. For the Gringo Papi, the goal was laughs, and it gets none, so Queen Cleopatra takes this one.
I'm hurt, man. If you wanted to hurt me, you got me, brother.
For entertainment value, I actually give this one to the Gringo Papi. It's not funny in the least, but I am going to say that watching Brenda prance around the stage, laugh at his own jokes, lie about his family, and pronounce his redacted Mexican dishes is more entertaining than anything Queen Cleopatra offers. After the first episode of that, you pretty much understand why everyone is upset, and the next 3 hours is just so you can say you watched the whole thing. Gringo Papi wins this one.
Chili,
Production value. Gotta give this one to Queen Cleopatra. The background on the Gringo Papi was one of the many memeable areas of this special. It looked like it had been cut out of cardboard. And for all of its lack of effort in the research department, Queen Cleopatra was a whole production that probably cost millions of dollars. It was definitely more of a waste of money than the Gringo Papi, but it tried harder, so it wins this one.
No fucking way, bro!
Runtime. Although the length of the Gringo Papi is certainly a funny element to how bad it was, for the purposes of this comparison, it actually works in its favor. Queen Cleopatra was damn near 4 hours. That's 8 Gringo Papis. With both being so bad and a waste of everyone's time, I have to say the Gringo Papi comes out on top on this one just for being shorter. I legitimately wanted my time back after finishing Queen Cleopatra. The Gringo Papi is more like, that sucked. Next YouTube video.
Well, here's what's amazing about the Gringo Papi.
Cultural relevance. I can see an argument being made that Queen Cleopatra is more culturally relevant because it failed on a bigger stage, it was attached to a more relevant name, and it evoked the hatred of an entire country after its release. I get all that, but I also think it's fading much quicker than the Gringo Papi has. When you say that name in comedy or MMA circles, you're nearly guaranteed to get a laugh. There's an entire internet subculture dedicated to hating Brendan Schaub. Inside jokes, phonetic spellings, shit, I wrote most of the scripts in Shabanese, B. In 10 years, no one's gonna remember Queen Cleopatra. On the contrary, with Schaub being the biggest lolcow on the internet, I think a lot of people are going to have fond memories of the culture surrounding the Gringo Papi and Brendan Schaub. Tom Bell's staying power, B.
The Dallas Improv, Arlington.
I think so, yeah.
That's where Gringo Papi was filmed.
Oh, no. Dude. How do you know that? How do you know that was filmed there?
I was fascinated by the entire...
So, moment of truth. Which one of these was worse? Well, surprisingly, I think it's actually Queen Cleopatra. Sorry, cats.
You know, it's like...
To me, it came down to the last two categories I discussed, runtime and cultural relevance. Queen Cleopatra is an absolute slog. I truly can't imagine anyone enjoying it, or even making it the whole way through without some sort of ulterior motive like I had. The Gringo Papi is a pretty easy watch, and it opens the door to an entire world of hilarious memes, inside jokes, and a community of people who all clown on Brendan Schaub. Yeah, it's not funny, but it's over in 25 minutes, and now you have a piece of what everyone on the TFATK subreddit is so infatuated with. Axe J.
My friend did tell me you're the CEO of PF Chang's. Holy fucking shit.
Oh my god, is this really happening right now?
Well, that being said, as a regular of PF Chang's, I still want the Gringo Papi to have the worst rating on IMDB. So if you've made it this far, go do me a favor and give Queen Cleopatra 5 stars. Let's get it to 1.2 so B can have the crown all to himself again. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.
Let me get a truck walk. Yeah, I can't talk, but I'm walking to my truck. Can I get a truck walk? Yeah, I can't talk, but I'm walking to my truck. Can I get a truck walk?